Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the postdoc talk. We're having Dr. Tanina Arab, which is a postdoc fellow at Johns Hopkins University in the lab of Dr. Kenneth Whitner. And her work focuses on studying extracellular vesicles in the context of neurodegenerative diseases and aging. And today, Tanina is going to give us a talk about the transition from grad school to a postdoc, the challenges, how was her path, and feel free to ask any questions in the chat about things that you might be curious about the postdoc life and the PhD life. So go ahead, Tanina.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for the kind introduction and for the invitation. You can call me Tanina, come on. No need to put Dr. Tanina. So welcome everyone. I was asking in the beginning if that's okay to turn on cameras. If you're comfortable, please do, so that it's more interactive and we can just see each other and it's always more friendly, but of course, no pressure. It's up to you. Before getting to the discussion itself, I would like to just spend a couple minutes or seconds here talking about the title itself. So the title was On Your Mark, Get Cozy and Chat. So by on your mark, I hope that I will have your full attention here and we can actually make it a very interactive events with questions. And then get cozy. This is my definition of a cozy spot with a very nice blanket and a warm drink. And this is mainly because these questions can be overwhelming, can be also hard. Any transition can be stressful, but it's really important to have this conversation with a positive loop between us and the person talking, and just get excited about it because we can focus on all the stressful vocabulary around academia and forget about the exciting part, the positive part. So hopefully this experience will be positive for you guys. And then, of course, I hope you all have your favorable drink. I have mine here, hot tea. And then chat. This is the definition of my cat, Cozy Spot. She prefers my keyboard rather than a nice blanket. So, and I'm not judging her. So I just want to tell everybody that this is a friendly chat. There is no judgment whatsoever. There is no wrong questions. So just like feel free to ask any question you may have. And yeah, let's talk about the grad school to postdoc, the overnight transition, because sometimes you don't have so much room and time between stopping or graduating from your PhD and then doing a postdoc, but it's all exciting. But before that, Sarah, if you don't mind copy pasting the link that I just sent to you to everybody. So just to make it a little bit interactive, I just put together some questions that I'm going to activate as we go. And this is just like to know everybody. So if you could please just like click on the link that Sarah did put in the chat box and answer the first question, which is your country of origin. Let's just see the representations that we have here. US, Palestine, welcome. Brazil, Portugal. So this is actually very exciting because it's a good representation of and we have United States. So this is a good representation of the EV field. It's very international, and it's also a good representation of what a postdoc can be, because usually a postdoc is international as well. And this brings me to my second question that you should see appearing. Should you consider a postdoc, will you be doing an international postdoc or more a domestic postdoc in your country? So we have 60% for now, that are considering international postdoc and 40% domestic postdoc. However, domestic postdoc can be also within the same country, but not within the same city. Like I have a lot of lab mates that are US citizen. Of course, they are doing a postdoc in the US, but when you fly from the West Coast to the East Coast, it's basically flying from Europe to the East Coast as well. All right, so this brings me to my own experience as an international postdoc. Where I came from and what was my journey. And please, everyone, keep in mind that this is just one experience. This is just me. Statistically, it's not significant at all. It's n equal 1. So this is just me saying that this is not like an example fitting a universal example. So everybody's experience is different, and that's totally okay. But yeah, so I'm born and raised in Algeria. And I got my bachelor degree from the Moulid Marmi University under the supervision of Dr. Houali. And then I went to France, where I got my PhD from Lille University, and also a master degree before that, under the supervision of Pierre-Eric Sautière. And then afterwards, I moved to Johns Hopkins, and I don't think I need to introduce my PI. Everybody knows him. So in the Whitwer lab under the supervision of Kenneth Whitwer. So pretty much 2 transitions actually, from bachelor to PhD, and then from PhD to postdoc. But I have to say that my experience in France was very different from my experience in US, and what I encounter as difficulties in France were also different from the difficulties that I saw in the US. But basically, now that I shared a little bit about my story and my journey, you know that I have all these hats basically that I play with. I'm definitely not a native speaker, and perhaps I already made mistakes during this presentation, which is totally fine. We have to own it. We're internationals, and we will always make mistakes, and we will never be like at the same level. I mean, would not say never, you shouldn't say never, but it's hard. It makes more effort to be at the same level as native speaker, which is totally okay. And that's not an impairment of your experience as an international postdoc. My postdoc position in the Whitwer lab is my first experience. And I'm also first generation, both of immigrant and also scientist. I'm a woman in STEM, international, as I said, and a Muslim coming from a third world country. So this all can be very discouraging. This all can be very overwhelming, because feeling the sense of belonging when you have all this identity is very hard. However, I also have mentors. I also have role models, motivation, a will to succeed, and most importantly, a support system and life outside of the lab. COVID-friendly life because of the era we are in. But bottom conclusion, what I'm trying to say here is that if I'm doing it, you can definitely do it. And it's all worth it at the end. So what is a postdoc position about? So this is a very, funny illustration. Basically, it's like saying EVs are only ectosomes, exosomes, and apoptotic bodies, which is totally false, and we all know that. So it's a very simplified one path where you can go after your PhD, but of course there is many paths, and there is other path other than academia, but this may be another talk. Today we're just going to focus on this transition to a postdoc. And this brings me to my next question that you should see. Ask me later. Let me see here. So in your point of view, how do you think a postdoc position is different from grad school? What are some of the things that are done in grad school that are different in a postdoc position in your point of view? Do you see the question though in the pool? Yes, you see. Okay. Less responsibilities, milestones and responsibility. This is actually very funny because someone is saying responsibilities and someone is saying less responsibilities. So we have a little debate here that we may open the floor for at the end of the presentation. And independent, yeah, that's very true. You have to be independent. responsibility, milestone responsibilities. Okay, so we agree that there are a lot of responsibilities. Skills as well, that's a good one. Cry. Who is suffering? Grants, this is very good. All right, okay, money. Well, money, we have to discuss about it. Is it salary? Because the salaries are not that high. All right, okay, well, actually, you nail it down very nicely. So yes, a postdoc position, in a postdoc position, you have to be a leader on your research project, and this is from day one. And this is perhaps the main difference comparing to grad school. Because in grad school, we're giving you like kind of a time in the beginning to adjust and to read literature, to get your skills, to learn how to do experiment, how to think scientifically and critically. However, in a postdoc, although you just moved to a new lab, to a new team, to a new country, you are expected to be efficient from day one because you already have all the skills that allows you to kind of work faster and get the meaning of the project faster. You would be doing a lot of mentorship for student, undergrads, and also visiting scholars. You may be doing that also in grad school. So this is actually an overlap rather than a difference, but you may have a frequency that is higher in the postdoc. Publish the work and presenting at conferences. This is very important, both for your lab, but also for yourself and for expanding your network. And also you may want to step into more leadership positions, like volunteering in the postdoc association in your institution, or what you're doing actually with the SNEV network, like making an initiative that can actually benefit the field. This is like a position where you can be doing that. And then of course, write grants. And this was also in the cloud words that we saw. So those are kind of the differences between postdoc and grad school, or I would say things that you will be doing more often and faster. Now, today's talk is about transitioning successfully. So I would say that to transition successfully, there are like two preparation steps. The first one is even before starting the position. So before starting the position, as you are wrapping up your PhD project, it's important, I think, in my view, again, this is just my experience, to hone the soft skills rather than the hard skills, because like the technical skills, the protocols, things like that, you will be trained when you join the lab. They will show you how they do stuff. You may be spending time to learn something, a technique or a protocol, and then you arrive in your postdoc lab and they can be doing it in another way than the way you have been trained on. It's not false, it's not worse, it's not better, it's just different. Like every lab has their own way of doing experiment. So I would say spending time honing your soft skills such as time management or project management is really what matters. And this is what can make you like being an outstanding postdoc rather than just a good postdoc. And then wrapping up your PhD work, but like for real, being a PhD done, because postdoc does take a lot of time. You have to navigate a lot of things, especially in the beginning. If you bring with you projects from your PhD, yes, PIs will understand that, because it happens very often where you need you have a paper under revision, or you need to wrap up a side project that you have been working on. There is like this overlap period, but if you can avoid it, just please do, because you don't want to be busy with something else as you are already navigating something that can be time consuming. And then the second step, so this is before even starting the position, And then within the first week of starting the position, so congratulations, you're already PhD done, and you have your postdoc position, you have been hired, and now it's your first day, your first week at this postdoc position. And I think a successful transition is both a transition to the new team, to the new lab, but also a transition to the new country or the new city, because those two factors really influence each other and nourish each other. If one of them is not going very well, like if you enjoy your lab absolutely a lot, but then you don't really enjoy the country where you are, or you feel unsafe, or for whatever reason, you just like don't find your balance in this new country, it would be a little bit hard to thrive in the lab, and vice versa. If you enjoy the country, but then the inclusion in the lab or the onboarding was not 100%, it would be actually hard to enjoy your stay in that country. So I think this two goes along with each other. And some of the tools or way to make your transition to the new team successful is actually within the first days to get to know the people you're going to work with, starting from your principal investigator, so that has a lab within an institution or a department. And then of course you have your lab mates. So a lab manager, postdocs like you, grad student, technologist, and it can be way more, but basically this is like how most labs are structured. So your PI, within the first week of your arrival to the lab, usually they will schedule a meeting with you, right? They will schedule a meeting, perhaps even have a lab tour with you. But if this doesn't happen for XYZ reason, your PI was traveling when you arrived, or the schedule was so busy that they didn't schedule this one-on-one meeting with you, or they just didn't thought about it, because those are very busy people. Be the leader again, be the leader on your journey, be the leader on your position, and ask for that, ask for a one-on-one meeting. But most importantly, and I cannot stress that enough, take notes, because chances are during this one-on-one meeting, this is your first exposure to the lab. This is your first exposure to the project. A lot of things may not make sense right away because it's new. You may have step out of your comfort zone a lot, and you're taking a project that you are not familiar with, or perhaps a pathology you're not familiar with. But taking a note that day, that first meeting will really help you throughout your journey. And then by time passes, things will like make sense. So those are just like some of the questions that you can ask about the science. For instance, what is the project you have been hired on? Because chances are there is many projects in the lab, and what you need to prioritize. Is there any deadline you should be aware of? Especially in the US, most of the lab are working under NIH grants, and NIH grants always have progress report. So basically it's a report, a yearly due report, where you have to say, this is what we have done, and these are the aims that we already covered and addressed, and these are the data, please see attached. If there is any deadline like this one, which is very important, coming 3 months or 6 months ahead of you taking the project, it's really important to be aware and be prepared accordingly. And then, yeah, what are the trainings that you should take? And this one is a very important. I mean, the two last ones are very important. So the first one is the PI expectations for you. For the first week, like short term, but also for the long week, like 6 months from the day you took the position. It can be weird to ask this question right away, but it's actually very helpful, because it will avoid you a lot of like conflicts back the road, because you will be doing exactly what your PI is expecting from you. This person is the person holding you accountable. This is the person that pays your salary. So you need to be at the same page with your PI. And if you are at the same page with your PI, chances are your postdoc experience would be great, right? So, and you need to be aware of any lab policy in place. This is basically like a written document that some PI have, but some PI don't, so it's not a mandatory thing. But if there is any lab policy in place, it's actually very helpful, because just by reading through it, you will get actually a lot of answers on your questions and expectations and how to navigate basically the lab to be in a good shape. So this is a really key towards a good transition. And during this meeting, it's also good to always finish up with an open question and giving the PI the chance to cover anything you may have missed or something that you didn't ask. And this is an opportunity for your PI to let you know which person to talk with, who is the closest in the lab to the project that you have been hired on, and just like cover anything you may have forgotten. And then depends on PIs, like some PIs are hands-on, some PIs are hands-off. So if your PI is hands-off, chances are you're not going to see them a lot in the lab, and you would be seeing other people. So it's important to identify your team lab members. So a lab manager or senior scientist or a research associate usually are the people that have the most experience in the lab and they stay the longest, so they know everything about everything. And those people are your to-go person wherever you have a logistic question or a scientific question, or just you wondering something. They are very, very helpful and very knowledgeable. Likewise for technologists. And this is actually a very good example of not making assumptions when you join a lab. Because for instance, when I was in Europe, the technologist was basically someone that is very helpful and that is a support for us. Here, for example, I see like sometimes technologists have their own projects, their own independent projects, and they don't always just like perform any PCR or preparing buffer for you or things like this. So you may want to introduce yourself and ask people about their role and their position without making any assumption based on past experiences, so that you really avoid offending anyone, and you are just in a good shape about knowing who does what. And if you have any requests in the future, you know exactly the person that you will go to. Grad students are also a huge part of the lab and the productivity of the lab. And those are the people you may want to talk about, because it can be a good mentorship or mentoring opportunity for you, but definitely not something to take like the first month when you land a postdoc position, because you want to focus on having your project up and running first before stepping into the mentorship. But it's always good to know what's going on in the lab and what the projects are about, and how your skills from previous experience can actually help or make people's life easier. And then postdocs, so those are in your corner. They struggle exactly with the same thing as you struggle with. They have the same questions. Perhaps they figure out some of them, but basically those people, you can just ask them anything, absolutely about everything. They not only help you navigate the transition to the team, but also the transition to the country, because they may have good tips on like places to go and where to live, where not to live, where is the safe area, the unsafe area, the good food. So it's really good to have a good community. But overall, anyone in the lab that has been there before you, even by couple months, may be helpful towards making your transition. And just like be nice to people and ask kindly. And overall, scientifically, just shadow everybody right away, like from day one. It can be very scary to ask someone to just follow them around, but it's really helpful because this is the only way to know where the reagents are, where the rooms are, and how things are done in that lab, and spot the differences in comparison with your previous position. And then lastly, we have the institution and the department. This is, I mean, this is not an investigation that you will be doing perhaps the first week, but it's always good to keep in mind that your department and institution are really part of your success as a postdoc, and they did put the work, they did put the efforts towards making resources available for postdocs. So you want to know the administrator names in the department and their responsibilities, because if you apply for a grant, it's good to know who is in charge of that and who is going to help you with the applications, or be aware of any mandatory or biosafety training that you need to undergo in the department as well. And for the institutions, at least in the US, most of the institutions have a postdoc office. If you have any like question about benefits, or you struggle with any really question about your postdoc life, they are the people that will point you to the right direction. A postdoctoral association is also a good resource toward making the transition, because you may find people that have the same background as you, or that spend time in same countries, or like you kind of line up with their journey. So it's helpful towards asking questions as well. And I just put more offices here, such as professional development, well-being and mental health. This is very important. You need to have a life outside of the lab to make it to the longer end. And outside of your work environment, what can help you to do the transition to a new country is definitely social media. Surprisingly, Facebook helped me a lot. Like I spotted a lot of groups in the city where I am, and like people from France or people from Algeria as well. And it just helpful to connect with these people and see if there is any event or things like this to do something outside of the lab as well, and to ask questions about visa issues or tax issues, things that you have to deal with when you transition to a new country. And yeah, I did put here, get to know your neighbors. This is very important, actually. And I realized when I started traveling that I needed someone to watch my cat when I am away. And thankfully, I knew my neighbors, so they could step in and watch her and give me some updates. So that was very helpful. And of course, traveling and exploring, it doesn't need to be fancy. Traveling, it doesn't need to cost a lot, because yeah, the budget is tight, but you can still explore your city, or you can travel for, I mean, with cheap options actually, but still have the full experience. And then this is almost my last slide. So these are just like useful resources towards helping you to prepare for this transition. So for instance, in the US, there is the National Postdoc Association. They have a very, very good website actually, and a section for international postdocs as well, with all the questions that I already like covered. And it's just helpful to have everything in one website and not like looking all around. And those are some resources from Johns Hopkins University. They have some content that is open source, and you don't need any Johns Hopkins ID to access them. So yeah, feel free to just like explore the website and see if there is anything that may help you to prepare for the transition. And then, yeah, please ask me questions, or if I perhaps forgot anything during the presentation, let's just cover it. So thank you.
Hi, Tanina. Thank you
Okay.
so much. This was
Sure.
like amazing. I was just thinking, I wish I had this before I started my postdoc because
Yeah.
it's so comprehensive. It's really good. Thank you so much. Um, I don't know if anyone else, I do have like a couple of questions, but anyone else that is like watching the talk, if you want to ask anything to Tanina, go ahead. You can either write in the chat or ask, but it's always nicer to ask in person, but go ahead.
Yeah.
If not, I'll just take over.
But I would say, like, I wish also I had this when I started my postdoc, because I think my postdoc experience would have been much easier and like straightforward.
Honestly, yeah.
And it's in this optic where like I would like to make it easier for the people behind me, like, or coming behind me, that I also like work on like onboarding stuff. Just because, yeah, as you said, it's really important to know where you're stepping in and what to do and what is expected.
No, it
Yeah.
was really good.
Thank you.
Anyone has a question? If not, I'll just ask my several questions. So one thing that I really, really thought was spot on was when you said that in grad school, the things you should cultivate is not actually like the science, but like networking, soft skills, because that's actually like super important. And it is true because people sometimes obsess too much about the science, publishing, and then they forget about other things that are actually important.
Mhm.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is, what skills do you think a postdoc should cultivate? What are like important things that a postdoc should acquire during their postdoc years if they want to continue in academia, or even if they want to move to industry or go somewhere
Yeah.
else? Like, what do you think?
I think the first one that comes to mind is time management, definitely, because we are very generous of our time, and time is the only thing that when you give it to someone or you give it to a task, it does not come back. You cannot buy more, it's gone. So, and I feel like it's sometimes very tempting to say yes all the time because of the opportunities that we have, because of the system that we are in, and because just of our field as well. Like the EV field is so exciting, and there is so many opportunities that you just want to do them all. But I think being very protective of your time and getting good at managing a calendar and at being strict with your time blocks. Like if you have a writing time blocks, it's a writing time blocks. There is no negotiation whatsoever. I don't care if there is a fire in the building, I am writing. So that's something like, yeah, Ken taught me very nicely, because like I think you noticed that perhaps by joining the EV Journal Club, it starts at the hour. And it does start at the hour, and it ends at the hour, and it does end at the hour. If there is a couple more questions, yes, we may cover them, but most of the time, let's end it here, and then you can follow up with the people. It's not being rude to be protective of your time. And I think this is something, it's a work in progress. Sometimes some days are better than others. But definitely, this is something I wish I got the exposure sooner, just to appreciate my time and protect it.
No, that is a great advice, because especially as a postdoc, when you are in the lab and you're doing something, and then you have the grad student or the tech coming to you, and you're kind of like unfocused, and then it's kind of hard to focus again. So that's a really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is that did you always wanted to be a postdoc when you were in grad school, or did you think that maybe you wanted to go to industry? And what made you want to pursue a postdoc? And also, did you plan to go to America? It just happened to have the opportunity. Like, how did it come to be?
That's funny story how I ended up in America. Well, did I want to do a postdoc? Definitely yes, because I well, first of all, I think it's just recently that the other career options after grad school are coming to light. like all the workshops that we're seeing about career options. I don't like using the career alternative words because I feel like alternative has a negative connotation. It's like something that is not as bad, as good as academia. It's an alternative. So I do prefer options. So I'm really glad to see that. I'm really glad to see that people start talking about all these career options. And there are many of them that one can pursue after grad school. But in my case, I definitely wanted to do an academic career with a teaching portion to it, because I got a teaching experience during grad school, and I really liked the interactions with undergrads while teaching them. So it just did make sense for me to do a postdoc. And then the other thing is that my PhD subject was very far away from where I wanted to make my career going. So I worked on an annelid model. It was very far away from translational studies and clinical studies. So I wanted like a postdoc experience that, and I can work with human subjects, and I can work like towards potentially bringing something to the clinic. So it just made sense for me to have this experience. Perhaps I would have it in an industry setup. Probably yes, because we have this assumption that in industry you don't have the freedom of thinking, blah, 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 but it's actually not the case. Like a postdoc in industry is also good, and the research and development section of industry is also good. So how I ended up in America. So let's back up in time. 2016, ISAF annual meeting in Rotterdam. So I was the second year PhD student, and my first international conference, very excited. So when I went there and I got back to France, I just naively added everybody that I met at this conference. So I went to LinkedIn. It was not even like personal messages. Like when I'm thinking about it right now, I'm kind of ashamed of the way that I did it, but it was really just sending invitations on LinkedIn. And Ken was one of those invitations. And then getting closer to my defense, I changed my headline in LinkedIn from PhD student. I mean, we don't have PhD candidate in France, so we are student from the starting to the end, but you got the point. So I changed my headline from PhD to looking for a postdoc position. But the other things that I did is adding keywords. So I added like what I was interested in. I was interested in neurodegenerative diseases, microglia, extracellular vesicles, things like that. And I think when Ken got his grant about the project that I was hired on, the keywords that I put and the keywords he put in the grant matched kind of. So the algorithm just helped leveraging my profile. And he contacted me and we discussed. Of course, I did the interview, and the timing was not good at all because he contacted me 15 days before my defense. And I was like, I cannot do an interview 15 days before my defense. Like my slides were in French. I cannot prepare another presentation. But of course, he was like excited and in a hurry. And he was like, oh, let's do it. Let's do it. So I switched my slide to English, and I ended up like giving them the presentation, and it was just an outstanding opportunity. And when I did my homework and I looked what his lab was up to and the institution, and then of course I talked with my husband and be like, okay, what do you think? Should we go to the US? Okay, let's go. And we just like gave it a shot. With no regret whatsoever. So yeah, it was something.
Tanina, thank you so much. We did have a question in the chat, but I think you pretty much replied, like you just answered the question. It's funny that you did that on social. I also found my postdoc in social media. I added my supervisor after a conference and then ended up like contacting her and all of that. So
yeah, definitely. I think like in the Europe, Twitter was not that famous
Yeah, that's
at
the
all.
thing. Yeah, science Twitter
Yeah,
is not really a thing, but LinkedIn is more like established
exactly,
there. So yeah, but
exactly.
definitely this is like I've been finding more and more people where like this approach is like better than actually looking for a postdoc and applying. Many times, if you contact the PI you're interested in, they might have a grant they just were awarded and are looking for postdocs. So it's always
Exactly.
worth to go straight to the person you would like to work with. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just avoiding self-rejection. Like we are
Yeah.
rejected so much in academia all the time. Paper
Mhm.
rejected, grant rejected, abstract
I have
rejected.
this saying that the no is always guaranteed. If you
Exactly.
apply and it's a no, it's a no. But if you don't apply, it's a no anyway. So you might as well just send the email, send the message.
Exactly. Yeah. And people are friendly. Like even
Yeah.
at the PI level, as you said, they perhaps don't have time to advertise their position on top of everything they need to do. So definitely reaching out and adapting the channel. So emails are very good because they for sure check their email box. But yeah, for the US, I feel like Twitter is the thing that works the best, and for Europe, LinkedIn. So
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if anyone else has a question.
I had a question. So, and it goes off this idea with grants and funding. What is the stability of a postdoc position if you run out of funding for your specific topic and or your idea never gets funded?
well, usually when you're hired at a postdoc position, your PI has the funding for it because your salary is coming out of their grants, and if they have been looking for a postdoc, then they have the money for it. But when you're doing your postdoc, it's really important to get this exposure. Sometimes it doesn't mean you don't get the funding. Well, thank you, this is the exit door, and you're welcome to leave. But it's more of, let's give you the grant mentorship, because a postdoc is it's a position that is a transition either to academia, being a PI. So basically it does prepare you for that position or any other career path. But one needs to keep in mind that it's a limited contract. You cannot be a postdoc forever. So I don't think there is, depends on labs again, because this is just like my thoughts, and perhaps other PI has other policies. But yeah, when you're hired, you have at least 1 year of secured funding. And then after that, it's good to, communication is key. So you may want to set up a meeting with your PI and discuss that. Grant opportunities for international students as well it may be tough, especially in the US, because most of the grants require you to have the permanent residency or even like the citizenship. So there are only few options where you can actually apply. So all of these are part of your mentorship and are part of the discussion that you may want to have with your PI.
I see. Okay, so then, so you don't necessarily negotiate the time frame up front. You assume, of course, you have a year, and then after the fact, you continue to negotiate along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And usually this contract are year length, right? Because depends where you're hired, but like School of Medicines in general, you have a 1 year contract, and then it's upon productivity. And if you're happy in the lab, if your PI is happy with you, and you undergo this IDP, the Individual Development Plan, that you write together, and then based on that, your long-term goal and your short-term goal, and also the status of money in the lab, if your PI can afford taking you for another year or no.
Well, this is what I find interesting is that for like any employment, you sign up for really saying that I'm planning on working here for X amount of time, unless I were to get fired for some reason. But a postdoc position is weird, and you don't have a contract really. You just say, like, okay, hey, you've got money for me, I'll come work for you.
Yeah. Well, depends on labs. Depends on lab and depends on PI and how how much transparency they want to have with you.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah, there is no rule fitting all for sure. But you may want to discuss with the PI what's the part of the lab policy actually. What is the policy for postdocs?
And then if you're doing as an international postdoc student, do you have, I'm assuming you have a certain visa that has a length as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
I am,
that visa.
yeah. So I am under a J1 visa, which is the research visitor scholar visa. So basically, there are differences between your actual citizenship and your country of origin. So you may want to check that with the Office of International Services because it's not always the same rules. So I am from Algeria. I have the Algerian citizenship so my J1 visa is like for 5 years. And then after this 5 years, either it doesn't mean I will stay in the Whitworth lab for 5 years when you sign up first. So you can't transfer your J1 from one institution to others. You have this flexibility, but then after the 5 years, you cannot extend this visa anymore, and you have to apply for a H1B visa. And the H1B visa is kind of a lottery. So you may get it, you may not get it. Depends on your institution, depends on a lot of factors that honestly, I don't have the skills to to cover the visa questions, but the Office of International Services in your institution will definitely be very helpful towards guiding you through that. But yeah, there is a length, and I was talking about eligibility based on citizenship and all of this for grants, but there is also eligibility based on the length of your postdoc. And when you look deeply into funding opportunities for postdocs, a lot of them are not eligible above 4 years or 5 years of postdoc. So this is also something that one needs to keep in mind. So I would say like a good length, although COVID impaired a lot our productivity, but a good length of a postdoc maybe like 3 to 4 years. And then you have to make your transition according to your plans.
I see.
Yeah.
And then how many hours do you think a postdoc works per week compared to graduate school?
That's a good question. And this is a debate. Is it working more or working more efficiently? Because I can come to the lab at 8 a.m. and leave at midnight. But how many hours did I actually work? So this is, I think, it's not the numbers of hours that you put in. There are seasons where you need to work longer hours for sure. If you're like working towards a deadline or you have a big project coming up or a grant or whatever, there are protocols that, yeah, needs you to be in the lab 16 hours, and that's okay. Like it's part of the protocol. You may leave one day at 4 a.m. because of XYZ reasons. But it shouldn't be a habit. I'm really an advocate for mental health and balance, and burning out. And it's actually funny because we're working towards putting something into patient maybe, or towards making people's health better at the cost of our own health. I don't think that makes sense. So one really needs to be focused, and this is where time management comes into the equation. And this is where, not like if you're chatting with everybody, taking breaks all the time, being in the hallways all day, we may have a delay in your day and leave later. And if that's the case, if you're really like working 80 hours a week, then perhaps you need to sit down with your PI and discuss priorities, discuss which projects you need to sprint on, and what are like the key deadlines and things like this. Because in the longer run, it's not healthy, and you will need 4 months to recover, and that's a huge delay.
Plus, so talking about starting at the hour and finishing at the hour, we have 6 minutes left. Does anyone else have any questions for Tanina?
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tanina.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come give us a talk about transition to a postdoc. We
Sure.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Tanina.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank
It was
you.
great.
Bless.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everyone.